Good morning, and once again, welcome to A Light in the Dark here on Faith FM. My name is Brad. I'm here with Peter, and we are here to talk about good things, Peter. We're here to talk about how the Bible makes a difference in the world around us, how Bible prophecy, how the people in the Bible, specifically the person of Jesus, will make a difference in your life today.
Absolutely.
And at the moment we are partway through a mini series that we're doing on A Light in the Dark here called Last Call, where we're delving into the book of Revelation and discovering what it is God actually wants us to get out of this book. Maybe you've tried to read Revelation before and you've thought to yourself, oh, there's a lot of strange things going on in this book, and man,
a lot of symbols.
Yeah, a lot of symbols and
weird creatures.
Well, as of today, when we're recording this episode, which is the 7th of November, 2024, we've just had an election over in the United States. And, you may have heard some of these symbols and things being used to refer to American political parties or politicians or the American government or American people in general before. And so, maybe on your social media feed at the moment, you're seeing some of these images flying around saying, oh, this is the mark of the beast, or it's this person, or it's this thing, or we're here to actually look at what the Bible says itself about these things today.
Hello, Brad. Hello, listeners. It's great to see you all. Well, I can't see you all. I'm in my mind's eye, I can see you. It's great to be with you.
Yep.
Yeah, today, coincidentally or providentially, we are looking at the third angel's message. So we've been looking at the three angels' messages in the context of this series called Last Call. As time runs out, will you check in? And we're looking at the three angels' messages, which are the heart and the book of Revelation, in Revelation 14, 6 to 12. We're looking at them through the lens of an airport and a flight that God is planning to take his people out of here. And so today our message is called Mirror Image. And actually we are going to talk a little bit about the US. And we're going to talk about a power that is identified in the second part of Revelation 13.
Okay.
And as you mentioned, Brad, this morning we're getting through all of the results. The election took place on Tuesday in the US, but that's usually a day away from us. When it's Tuesday in the US, it's usually Wednesday here.
Yep.
And then, of course, it takes another day to sort of get the result formalized and so forth. And so, yes, Donald Trump has been re-elected president of the United States. And, we want to ask the question, does that mean anything? We're not really going to focus on the US election, but what we are going to focus on is the United States of America prophesied in Scripture. Is it pictured in Scripture? And we want to look at that specifically today in our program.
Because the Bible does obviously refer to different kings and kingdoms.
Different nations, and particularly we're looking at it from the perspective of end-time events.
Sure, yeah.
So we believe here on this radio station that we don't live at just any time in history. We believe we live at the last period of history known as the time of the end.
Yep.
And we see that this power has a significant part to play, and we'll be unpacking that today.
All right.
Before we do that, though, I do want to shout out a couple of things that this coming Sunday morning, if you're around the Warburton area, please do drop by, because at the ADRA Community Centre on Warburton Highway in Warburton, there is the Warburton Community Group Showcase, where a number of community groups will be advertising and promoting what they do in the community.
Nice.
So we're going to look forward to that. Our church will have a stand there, and Faith FM will be prominently represented there. I'll be there.
Great.
And if you want to meet me on the lawn there in front of the ADRA Community Centre in Warburton, you will be most welcome. There's going to be food and drink there. So we would encourage you to come along and enjoy some time. That's 10 a.m. on Sunday, this Sunday, 10th of November, from 10 through 1. we'll be there. So come along and say hello.
That's right. And if you hear something on the show today and you're like, oh, I don't know if I agree with that, I'm sure Peter would love to have a chat with you.
Yeah. No, don't shake your fist at me, but please do come up and have a chat.
Yep.
We do encourage dialogue, and we'd love to have a chat. Something else I want to tell you about, which is a couple of weeks away now, on Wednesday, the 20th of November, a good friend of mine, Jeff Lucas, and someone who's actually been on the radio here at Faith Heaven with us.
Yes.
He's done a couple of shows, and I've already talked to him. He'd like to do some more, so we'll do that next year as well.
All right, yeah.
But Jeff Lucas is going to be presenting a couple of programs, 2-week program called Money Minded. This program can help you gain skills in managing your money. And so that's going to be an interesting program. It's going to take place at 7 p.m. Wednesday evening, the 20th of November. It'll also be on the following week, Wednesday, the 27th of November. And that also is at the Adra Community Centre, Warburton Highway, Warburton. So if you are available for that, come along. We would love to see you. And I will advertise that again, obviously, next week as well.
All right, fantastic. So if you'd like to join the conversation with us today on A Light in the Dark, or you are wanting some more details about either of those things Peter was just sharing, maybe if you're the United States government, this idea of understanding how to manage your money, not to mention the Australian government or the Victorian state government or whatever it might be.
The national debt.
Yeah. You might be thinking to yourself, oh, maybe we need some tips and tricks for that. Feel free to text in, let us know on 04888 808 31. That is 04888 808 31, and we will make sure we get you that information so you don't miss out.
All right.
Yeah, and as we delve into this today, Peter, it's funny, we were just talking about the American national debt and that sort of thing. Before the show, we we're kind of talking about, we think about end times and things like that.
Yeah.
When you look at things like the debt of countries around the world, it keeps increasing, and the amount that they have to spend on interest payments on debt is just going up and up and up. To me, I look at it and say,
unsustainable is what you're looking at.
It's unsustainable. Like, there has to be an end point to this where it all goes pear-shaped, right?
Yeah. Well, that's right. Look, there are a number of issues facing the world that only God is going to be able to solve. And largely because most of the issues that are facing the world are man-made, right? So even if, let's talk about climate change for a moment.
Sure.
And we'll talk more about this, by the way, in next week's episode when we talk about the Mark of the Beast and the subject of the loyalty program we're going to talk about.
Sounds interesting.
But but let's talk about climate change. Let's suppose for a moment that, I don't know what our listeners believe, but I think one of the interesting things about the conversation around climate change is the idea that human beings have had a negative effect on the natural world, right? Yeah. Whether you believe in climate change in that instance or not, there's no denying the natural world has been influenced by the Industrial Revolution and lots of other things.
Absolutely.
And the amount of animals and fish and birds have decreased on planet Earth as a result. So we are having an impact on that. And I think that when we look at some of the other bigger problems that the world faces, like poverty, like famine, like the state of the economy you were talking about, like military conflict, like how do we deal with pandemics, all of these different things, social unrest, moral decay, the list could go on and on and on. And ultimately, the Bible is telling us that God has a solution for those things, and mankind is not the solution, but has actually been the problem. We've contributed to the problem, and we're trying to look for ways to save ourselves. But the reality is, we need to humble ourselves and say, only Jesus can save.
Sure, yeah.
Not only in the spiritual sense, but in every sense. And in fact, what sometimes I think we deny, and certainly as an atheist I would have denied, is that the spiritual aspect of my being has a huge influence on all the other aspects of my being. So the way I think, the way I choose to treat my body, the way I choose to treat other people, are all massively influenced by my spiritual health.
Oh, for sure. I mean, from my perspective, I'd say if you don't believe that your life has any value, if it's just a matter of chance and you're here and you'll be gone, then why should you care about planet Earth?
Yeah.
Why should you care about how other people are treated, anything like that?
Yeah, you've got to get what you can while you can, because it's short.
Yep, and that would make sense.
Yeah.
But if you do believe that there was a God who created you and everything and everybody,
and the world around us.
Yeah. Suddenly you start to think, well, what do I owe the people around me, so to speak?
And how do I build those relationships?
Yeah.
They become more important, don't they? If you're made for a relationship with God and with others, then that whole focus, this was the thing for me, I think, and one of the paradigm shifts from being an atheist to being a believer is that actually I was made for a relationship with God. I was made for a relationship with my other beings. I mean, I only exist because my parents brought me into the world. Yep. Therefore, I should have a relationship with my parents. I should have a relationship with my brother. I should have a relationship with other human beings, because if the Bible is true, and it is, that we all came from Adam and Eve, we're all brothers and sisters.
Yeah, sure.
Everybody has value. And so it does change the paradigm. So anyway, my point is, to get back to today's message, we are, as we've said, looking at the heart of the book of Revelation, the three angels' messages in a series we're calling Last Call. As time runs out, will you check in? And today we're going to be looking at episode number 8.
Number 8. That
means that if you have not listened to episodes 1 to 7, it would be good for you to listen to them. Don't not listen today. But in listening today, understand that there are 7 episodes that come before this that helped us to lay the table, so to speak.
So if you're missing a bit of context, just visit faithfm.com.au and you can find the programs page there, or download the Faith FM app.
Yeah, right. And so now we are in episode 8. We're definitely looking at the third of these 3 angels' messages that go to all the world just before Jesus comes. And today we are going to be looking at the second beast in Revelation 13. Well, what is a beast? Well, a beast, we've discovered, is a kingdom, a nation, a political power. And there are 2 major beasts in Revelation 13. Last week we covered the first one. This week we're going to look at the second.
Yep.
And we believe that this represents none other than the United States of America. And people might be shocked about that and say, well, the Bible was written 2,000 years ago and, the United States didn't become a nation until 1776. And, how does that fit? We're going to take a look at all of that. And not only the identification of this kingdom, or this nation, we should say, but what implications does that have for the end times that are just ahead of us now?
All right. Interesting stuff. You're listening to A Light in the Dark here on Faith FM. We're going to hear now Giants and Pilgrims with a song called Praise to the Lord, the Almighty. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back in just a couple of minutes' time.
So praise him, for he is thy health and salvation. All you who hear, now to his temple draw near. Praise him in glad adoration.
Praise
life and breath, come now with praises before Him. Let the Amen sound from His people again. Gladly forever adore Him. Gloria, 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 Gloria,
You just heard there Giants and Pilgrims with the song Praise to the Lord the Almighty from an album called Bellwether. You're listening to A Light in the Dark here on Faith FM. If you've just tuned in, welcome back. If you are listening live, today is Thursday, the 7th of November, 2024. Remember, you can always join in our conversation here by texting in on 04888 808 31. And today we are in our mini-series called Last Call, where we're delving into the book of Revelation. And our episode that we're up to is episode 8 in this series, titled Mirror Image. And we're going to be jumping into Revelation 13. And Peter, before the break, you dropped a bit of a bombshell on us saying that, this beast in Revelation is the United States of America? What?
Yeah.
How could that be?
Outrageous. How dare you say such a thing? Well, last week, so we're talking about mirror image is the title of today's episode. Mm-hmm. And that is because the Bible reveals in Revelation 13 there are two beast powers, and these represent, we unpacked this last week, they represent kingdoms, nations, political powers. That's what a beast represents. And we do this today. We talk about the wallabies, we talk about the springboks, and we mean Australia and South Africa. Yep. So we use animals, beasts, to represent kingdoms. So this isn't saying that these are beastly people or anything like that. That's not what we're saying. It's simply saying
about the transforming lizard people.
No, that's right. That's right.
Yep.
So we might say the two animals, right? Mm-hmm. But the Bible uses the word beasts, and it simply means two animals. These two animals are representative symbols of two kingdoms. The first symbol, if we go to Revelation 13, the reason we're looking at it is because in the third angel's message of Revelation 14, it says, if anyone who worships the beast or his image or his mark, there are significantly negative consequences, right? So we need to unpack who is the beast, who is the image. Last week we talked about the beast. This time we're looking at the image of the beast, because the Bible tells us that this second beast of Revelation 13 forms an image to that first beast, a mirror image, as it were. So let's go to Revelation 13 and verse 10. Yep. This is the last verse that describes the first beast that we talked about last week, okay? And so let's read Revelation 13 and verse 10.
Sure. It says, he who leads into captivity shall go into captivity. He who kills with the sword must be killed with the sword. Here is the patience and the faith of the saints.
All right. So it says, he who leads into captivity shall go into captivity, and so forth. And he who kills with the sword must be killed with the sword. This power we identified last week as the Roman church state power of the Dark Ages. Okay. And it had led people into captivity. It had indeed killed people with the sword. And it itself received a deadly wound. In 1798, Napoleon was on the rise, and Napoleon wanted to conquer all of Europe, and he knew that he could not conquer all of Europe unless he defeated the papal power, the papal system, because it had a large influence in Europe. It had massive amounts of land, and so Napoleon sent his general into Rome to arrest the Pope in 1798, and this deadly wound was received.
Yeah, I think sometimes we forget just how significant the power of the Roman Church was in that time.
We
I was
do.
reading the other day the story A Man for All Seasons about Sir Thomas More,
Okay.
and just talking about, it's basically a story about an English lord politician who was
Yes.
pressured on both sides by King Henry VIII
Yes.
to say,
One thing.
and by the Roman Catholic Church to say something else.
Yes.
So, we think about it today and we go, oh, well, it's a church. They have some influence and authority, but not that much.
Yeah.
But back in the day, it was on the same level, if not greater than that of kings and other kingdoms.
And you mentioned King Henry VIII there. That was the point of separation between England and the Roman Church. Up until that point, everybody was Catholic. And so that set I'm an Englishman, so
Sure, yeah.
So set England on a course of Protestantism, and particularly there was some fluctuation with Henry's son Edward, and then Bloody Mary, who tried to return to Catholicism. Then Queen Elizabeth I really set the course of England being a Protestant nation, and people remember the Spanish Armada and so forth. And so because that's such a long time, that's 500 years ago, if you are in a country that came under the influence of England, such as Australia has, then we sometimes forget that we've had 500 years of separation from Rome. And because of that Protestant ethic too, that we have the freedoms that we enjoy. So we believe in freedom of conscience. That's very strong, that you are able to determine what you believe, and you can live your life based on that belief, so long as you're not infringing on the rights of others. And we love that freedom. And we've lived in that freedom in Australia, in England, in Europe, most of Europe, for many, many years, and we take it for granted, I think. And we forget, as you say, the power that the Roman Church had over the lives of people from the cradle to the grave and beyond. So that's important. So in other words, when we look at this verse in verse 10, it said, he who leads into captivity shall go into captivity. He who kills with the sword must be killed with the sword. This is reference to the fact that the papacy would go into captivity. In 1798, under Napoleon, they would go into captivity, and Protestants around the world, in Europe and in the United States, saw that as a fulfillment of prophecy.
Okay.
They saw that as a fulfillment prophecy. So here, towards the end of the 1700s, we have the papacy receiving its deadly wound, going into captivity. The very next verse is Revelation 13:11, and I would like you to read that, Brad.
Sure. It says, then I saw another beast coming out of the earth, and he had two horns like a lamb and spoke like a dragon.
All right. So this other beast, I saw another beast coming up out of the earth, had two horns like a lamb and spoke as a dragon. There are a number of clues in this verse that need unpacking and interpreting.
Sure, yeah.
So bear in mind the previous verse, we see the first beast, which we've identified as the Roman church state power, going into captivity. Then it says, then I saw another beast coming up. Okay, so this other beast is coming up at the time when the other beast is going down into captivity. Secondly, it says, I saw another beast coming up out of the earth. So this is another state power. That's what a beast means. It's coming up, so it's rising towards the end of the 1700s. It is coming out of the earth. What's significant about that? Well, the first beast came up out of the sea. And the Bible tells us in Revelation chapter 17, verse 15, that the waters which you saw represent multitudes of people. So in other words, when the first beast comes up out of the sea, that represents multitudes of people, a very populous area. That's where that first beast arose. In fact, the first beast arose at the heart of the Roman Empire. Right? And so then this beast is coming up out of the earth, a much more sparsely populated area of the world. And it says then it had two horns like a lamb and spoke as a dragon. Well, who's the lamb in the book of Revelation?
We understand that that's Jesus.
Jesus Christ. In fact, John the Baptist said, behold, the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world in John chapter 1, verse 29. So it has two horns like a lamb, but then it spoke like a dragon. Who's the dragon in the book of Revelation?
Oh, yeah. So that's Satan. So
That's Satan.
the whole
Revelation
conflict.
12:9 tells us clearly the dragon is Satan. So what a conundrum here. You have this beast, which is a state, rising into power at the end of the 1700s. It in a sparsely populated part of the world. It has two horns like a lamb. It's Christ-like in its rising, but then it speaks as a dragon, speaks like the devil. What a conundrum. What a great disguise, by the way. If you look like a lamb, but you speak like a dragon, that's a very deceptive sort of formula. And sometimes, by the way, those two horns are a symbol of power throughout the Bible, and some have suggested that those two horns represent the essence of the United States power, which is religious liberty and civil liberty. In other words, and we'll dive in a moment into how the United States was founded, because they wanted a country without a king, and they wanted to have a church without a pope. In other words, they wanted the freedom to live without having to pay homage to a king. They wanted the freedom to worship according to their conscience. And the reason for that is they were the people that established America, really were fleeing from Europe. And why were they fleeing? They were fleeing religious persecution. They were fleeing there. We'll talk a little bit in a moment about the Pilgrim Fathers. Some people may have heard of the Mayflower. And I've been to Plymouth in England, from which the Mayflower sailed. And there's a list on I think it was on the wall of a pub or a shop there. There's a list of all the people who got on board that boat and sailed for America. And the purpose of their sailing was they wanted freedom. They wanted freedom to practice their religion according to the Bible and according to their conscience, rather than the state religion, whether it be the Church of Rome, whether it be the Church of England. They were under oppression from a state-governed church, and they wanted to be able to say, we want to practice our faith according to our conscience as we read the scriptures. And that's why, by the way, you have Thanksgiving in America and all of those things. So they landed on the east coast of America, the Pilgrim Fathers, in 1620. And that's really the beginnings of the story of America as we understand it from, the Christian point of view.
Fantastic. Well, we're getting a bit of a history lesson today, which I love. I love delving into history and understanding how Christianity fits through all of it. You're listening to A Light in the Dark here on Faith FM. We're going to hear now Paper Horses with a song called An Honest Word. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to A Light in the Dark on Faith FM. We'll be back in just a couple of minutes' time.
I don't have a victory song. I'm not beating any holy battle drum. It's taking all the strength I've got just to put one foot in front of the other. I can't swing a heavy sword like David. I threw off the old king's clothes. Now I'm standing in the street like an orphan looking for her mother. All I have to give now is surrender, as if I even could put up a fight. I don't think you need one more defender. It's enough to be your child. When my praises felt like tears, when the honey dried up in the famine years, you were standing there, you're standing here, both sides of the river. All I have to give now is surrender, as if I even could put up a fight. I song, a heavy sword. These are not the offerings you're asking for, but a humble heart and an honest word. You want a humble heart and an honest word, an honest word.
You just heard there Paper Horses with a song called An Honest Word from an exclusive EP that's got the same name, Paper Horses, that you can find on Bandcamp. You're listening to A Light in the Dark here on Faith FM. Remember, you can text in at any point on 0488 808 31, and make sure you store down that number if you haven't before, because a little bit later in the show, we've got an awesome free offer for you that is completely connected to this whole series and today's episode that we're talking about. You're not going to want to miss out on it. As soon as you hear what it is, you're going to say, yes, I can't wait to...
I want to get that.
I want to get that. That's right. So 0488 808 31 is the number you're going to want to either write down or remember or put in your phone, whatever you like. But yes, let's get back into it, into Revelation 13 is where we're at.
Yeah. So, like I said, Revelation 13, there are two beasts there. The one is described from verses 1 to 10. Mm-hmm. We believe that to be the Roman church state power.
Yep.
Then we are looking at the second beast today, Revelation 13, 11 through 17. Mm-hmm. And so I'd like you to read again, Brad, if you'd read Revelation 13, 11 and 12, please.
All right. It says, Then I saw another beast coming up out of the earth, and this beast had 2 horns like a lamb and spoke like a dragon. And this beast exercises all the authority of the first beast in his presence, and causes the earth and those who dwell in it to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed.
All right. So one of the things we noticed here, there are a number of different identifying characteristics that we've looked at.
Yep.
We also note that he causes the world, the earth, and those who dwell in it to worship the first beast. So in other words, for any power that is going to arise and cause the earth and those that dwell in it to do anything, it's going to have to be a major power.
Yeah,
all right. And as we mentioned before, the first beast, which we believe to be the Roman church state power, went into captivity in 1798. Mm-hmm. And so at the end of the 1700s, you've got the first power going into captivity. This power is coming up. What power could this be? Mm-hmm. Now, John Wesley wrote a book called Notes on Revelation.
Okay.
Where he was talking about various things in Revelation and
John Wesley, famous reformer, he was the one who translated the Bible into English initially, wasn't he?
No, that's John Wycliffe.
Ah, sorry.
So John Wesley, he was in the 18th century, lived into his 90s, I think. Okay. He was an English preacher. He was an Anglican preacher. His father was an Anglican preacher.
Yep.
He became an Anglican preacher. But then I think he was barred from preaching in the churches. So he used to stand outside churches and he began preaching outside, which was one of the things he was famous for. But of course, his followers then began the Methodist movement.
Yes.
So if you've heard of the Methodist Church, John Wesley is largely responsible for that. And John Wesley, in his study of the book of Revelation, in his book Notes on Revelation, he wrote about this second beast, whom we are identifying as the United States. But notice what he says here. He says, this was in 1754, okay? 1754. He says, John Wesley said, he is not yet come, but he cannot be far off. For he is to appear at the end of the 42 months of the first beast. John Wesley knew the first beast was coming to an end.
Yep.
In 1754, he wrote this. Now, of course, the first beast did come to an end in 1798. So John Wesley understood about that first beast.
Yeah, sure.
He's saying the second beast is not yet come, but he cannot be far off
Yep.
because he's going to appear at the end of the first beast's, decline. And so that was interesting in itself. If you think about the United States' history, its Declaration of Independence was 1776.
Okay. Oh, yeah, that's right. Yep.
Anybody remember the 4th of July celebrations? That's their American Independence Day. On the 4th of July, 1776,
Yep.
that's when the Declaration of Independence was signed. And then, of course, you have the Constitution of the United States, 1787. The Bill of Rights, 1789. The Bill of Rights is adopted in 1791. So towards the end of the 1700s, you have this power rising, okay? And this is the same time as the first beast is going into decline in 1798. So when you come to the 1800s, in 1851, there was a Bible scholar by the name of J.N. Andrews. There's a university in America named after him, Andrews University.
Okay. Yep.
J.N. Andrews in 1851 was the first Seventh-day Adventist in print to identify Protestant America as the power represented by the second beast in Revelation 13.
Okay, so interesting that it would be somebody who was a Protestant in America who would say, actually, I think based off what the Bible says and based on what I'm seeing in my own country, I think this lines up.
Yeah. And so
I guess the point is that it wasn't like an adversarial thing, so to speak.
Correct.
It wasn't someone else looking on from outside and going,
he's not poking his finger at some other nation and saying, they must be France must be the second beast or whatever. No, he is recognizing that the United States is that beast power, even though he's an American.
Yep.
I'm sure he's a patriotic American. He's a Christian American. And yet he is able to see in 1851. Then there were others, who wrote about that, and many have done so since. Okay. But I want you to remember a few things about this. So we've got in print J.N. Andrews, 1851, identifying Protestant America as the power represented as the second beast of Revelation 13. In 1851, the U.S. Army had 20,000 men. That's 1/10 of the number of combatants at the Battle of Waterloo in 1815.
Yep.
Right? So when you're thinking about the 19th century, you go back to 1815, the Battle of Waterloo. There are 10 times as many people on the battlefield as are in the U.S. Army at that time. So in other words, the point is when J.N. Andrews is making this identification, the U.S. is not world power, much less the most dominant one.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
I guess, some people might say, well, you had things like the War of 1812 and invading parts of Mexico and things like that. But for the most part, you're right. You could say that on a global stage, the United States of America was not the big player.
It was a blip. Like, for instance, in the mid-1800s, the world's greatest powers were still the old ones. Prussia, France, England, Austria-Hungary. These were the major powers of the mid-1800s. I mean, here we are in Australia because there was once a British Empire. There's no longer a British Empire. But the remnants of that empire are still around. And so why are we speaking English today this far away from England?
Why do we have the Commonwealth Games?
And all of that kind of stuff. So those major powers in the mid-1800s, America was not even considered to be it's a young child at that point. Even in 1876, which is 25 years after J.N. Andrews identifies this power as the United States, 1876, Sitting Bull's Braves wiped out General Custer's 7th U.S. Cavalry Regiment. In other words, 25 years after this identification is made, the Americans are still fighting the Native Americans, the Indians, and losing. And so in other words, when you consider when you read that verse 12, that this power is going to cause the earth and those who dwell in it to follow that first beast, you're thinking, well, how on earth is it going to be powerful enough to be able to do that? And in 1851, when this identification was made by a Bible scholar, in other words, he's not looking at the landscape
Yep.
and saying, let's look away round for the biggest power, and we'll say, that's it.
Yeah,
and that's
right.
the mistake sometimes we make, I think, as Christians in the book of Revelation and Bible prophecy, is we look around at the news and then we go to the Bible and try and wedge it in there.
Sure, yeah.
Whereas I think that one of the things we can learn from this is we must go from the Bible,
Yep.
understand the Bible properly, and then we can look at the world and say, where does the history fit?
Yep.
Rather than the other way around. And so here is J.N. Andrews looking at the Bible and saying, from a biblical point of view, this looks like the United States.
Okay.
From an outside point of view right now, it doesn't look like it because we're barely on the map. But from a biblical point of view, it looks like the United States. So even in 1933, when Adolf Hitler became the Führer in Germany, the US was the 17th largest army in army strength in the world, behind Spain, Turkey, and even Poland. So this is significant from the perspective that if we're talking about this power, what J.N. Andrews said, even in 1851, looked unlikely. But today we can see, essentially America became one of two superpowers. You think about the Cold War.
Yep.
And then, of course, you see the fall of the Soviet Union. It became the dominant superpower in the world. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. So we'll read verse 12 again.
Sure. And this beast exercises all the authority of the first beast in his presence, and causes the earth and those who dwell in it to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed.
All right. So we've said before, whoever this beast is, whoever this state power is, it has to have enough clout to be able to cause the world to do something, right? And in this case, it's saying it's causing the world to worship the first beast. We've identified the first beast as the Roman church state power. Okay, so apparently this power, even though it's a Protestant power, is going to actually cause the world to worship the church, the Roman church state power. That's what this verse is saying. How is it going to do that? We're going to talk about that as we go through. And we're going to look a little bit more of history as we go through, because it's fascinating. You know, people have talked in the last few years about saying, the United States has changed. Well, yeah, it's changed many times. And we're going to look at some of that history going forward.
Okay. Interesting stuff. Yeah, it's definitely a really worthwhile topic delving into, I think, because, if you make a big claim saying, all right, this is who it is,
absolutely,
you've got to really delve through the evidence and say, all right, well, this is why.
Well, I feel comfortable that I wasn't around in 1851, but somebody else made that claim, and we're testing that claim.
Yeah. Yep, I like that. You're listening to A Light in the Dark here on Faith FM. Don't go anywhere. We're going to hear now Enterline with a song called Heart and Soul. Stick around. After this song, we're going to be giving away the code word for today's free offer as well, which you're not going to want to miss out on. We'll be back in just a couple of minutes' time.
Before I could stand, you lifted me. Before I could walk, you ran to me. Before I could live, you died for me. No greater love than what you've done. Before I could stand, you lifted me. Before I could walk, you ran to me. Before I could live, you died for me. No greater love than what you've done. In my heart, I will praise your name. In my soul, I'm forever changed. In my life, I'm trusting you, our Lord. In my heart and in my soul. soul. Oh, as the brightness of your love appears in my heart, in my soul, I will not fear. Your glory shines, dark disappears in my heart, in my soul. As the brightness of your love appears in my heart, in my soul, I will not fear. Your glory shines, dark disappears in my heart, in my soul. In my heart, I will praise your name. In my soul, I'm forever changed. Before I could stand, you lifted me. Before I could walk, you ran to me. Before I could live, you died for me. No greater love than what you've done.
You just heard there Enter Line with Heart and Soul from an album called Kingdoms. Appropriate because we're talking about particular kings and kingdoms and beasts and all sorts of things here on A Light in the Dark today. Well, we're into our last segment, which means we should give you the code word for today's free offer. If you've been finding all of this today very interesting, like delving into the history, understanding how all these different beasts and countries and churches and city-states all fit together in the grander scheme of Christianity and the world, the free offer we have for you today is something you're going to really enjoy. It's a great book called The Great Controversy. If you want to understand a bit more about what we've been talking through in this series in Revelation, this is really the basis for it. So if you would like to get your hands on a copy of this free book, it's absolutely free. There's no postage cost to you, no obligations. We're not going to chase you down or anything like that. All you need to do is text today's code word, which is ALD51. So ALD51. Text that to our show number 0488 808 31. So one more time to get your absolutely free copy of The Great Controversy, fantastic book that touches on all the things we've been talking about today. Text ALD51 to our show number 0488 808 31. If you missed either of those things, don't worry, we're going to share it again at the end of the show. But Peter, let's get back into where we were, because there's still heaps to cover in this section of Revelation.
Really yeah. So we're talking about the second beast of Revelation 13, and it's going to cause the earth and those who dwell in it to worship the first beast. I wrote a question down here. So what about all of this prophecy stuff?
Sure, yeah.
So, the Bible is about Jesus, essentially. But we've also recognized there's a war going on between good and evil. Yep. And that's why, hence, the book we talked about, The Great Controversy.
Yep.
And so, therefore, there's a war on God's character. And it's about how, is God represented? One of the reasons Jesus came into the world is to show us what God was like. And what we have is the state, if you like, a nation which has hijacked religion. It's hijacked Christianity. We see that in the Dark Ages.
Yep.
We're seeing it again now with the United States having its version, if you like, of Christianity. And some people are put off by that. And some people think, well, that doesn't sound very Christian to me.
Well, there's always plenty of debates online I see about American evangelicalism.
Exactly. Yeah.
And whether that should be involved in politics or not. And
and we talked about the early history of how the Pilgrim Fathers came to America. And it was by nature a Protestant country.
Sure, yeah.
But in order for this verse to be fulfilled in verse 12, where it says it's going to cause the earth on those who dwell in it to worship the first beast. It's going to have a change of heart. And we see in history, we see a thawing, if you like, of relations between Protestants and Catholics in the United States.
Yep.
So in the 1960s, John F. Kennedy was famously elected president of the United States. He was the first Roman Catholic president.
Okay.
And so I've got a photograph I'm looking at here where John F. Kennedy met Pope Paul VI in 1963, July 63, the year of Kennedy's death, of course.
Yep.
So the fact that he was elected as a Roman Catholic president, that indicated a thawing in relations between Protestants and Catholics. People didn't see that as big a deal as they might have done 50 years ago, before that.
Yeah, there was, I mean, again, one of those historical things we probably forget. There was actually, in the United States for a long time, a lot of fear of the Catholic Church because of the history of oppression that had gone on in Europe.
And that's why there is a separation of church and state in America. That's why there is, in the Constitution and in the amendments to the Constitution, that they say that we're not going to make any law regarding your religion because that's your conscience. That's up to you, right? That was very important.
Sure.
Come to the time of Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan actually establishes the first U.S. ambassador to the Vatican.
Right.
So this is another indication of the thawing of relations between Protestant America and the Roman Church state, because hadn't been ambassador, why would a Protestant nation send an ambassador to a church?
Sure, yeah.
That wouldn't make any sense. And so they were established and they've, had ambassadors ever since. Through the 80s too, you find that there are negotiations between Ronald Reagan and Pope John Paul II. And we discover in 1992, Time magazine published a document, published on their front cover, Holy Alliance.
Right.
And it says how Reagan and the Pope conspired to assist Poland's solidarity movement and hasten the demise of communism.
Okay, so basically what we're saying is that the Roman Catholic Church, even in the modern sense, acts in a political way as well.
Right. Well, see, obviously the Pope John Paul II was a Roman Catholic, obviously, but he was Polish.
Sure.
The point of view, he was Polish.
Yep.
So he was able to, motivate the priests in Poland to work with the Solidarity movement to bring down communism in Poland, and then communism fell in those eastern states and communism fell in the Soviet Union.
Yep.
And so, if you like, there was capitalism, which is the United States, Catholicism, Pope John Paul II,
right.
And then they had a common enemy, which was communism.
Okay.
And so they conspired together. So the papacy was able to work from the inside through its network of priests. The US was able to start an arms race with the Soviet Union, which the Soviet Union was just not able to keep up with, and to essentially bankrupt the Soviet Union.
Yeah, sucked them into the endless war in Afghanistan.
All of that stuff. So very interesting. So we just see this in terms of the development. I want to read through verses 13 through 17 of Revelation 13, just so that we can cover the scriptural territory, and then we'll unpack some of that.
All right. The second beast, 13 says, the second beast performs great signs, so that he even makes fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men. And he deceives those who dwell on the earth by those signs, which he was granted to do so in the sight of the beast, telling those who dwell on the earth to make an image to the beast who was wounded by the sword and lived.
Let's pause right there.
All right.
So what is this fire from heaven? Well, there are a number of things that you think about. Maybe some people think about Elijah when fire came down from heaven as an answer from God. This one is talking about a counterfeit fire from God, if you like, because this is clearly not on God's side. But also there's another interesting story in the book of Acts where you have fire coming down from heaven on the disciples, and they begin to speak with tongues on the day of Pentecost, and people can hear it in their own language.
Okay, so it's a spiritual power.
Yeah, correct. And so some have suggested that this counterfeit fire from heaven could be a counterfeit Holy Spirit with a counterfeit gift of tongues that is used as a symbol to say, hey, this must be God's blessing. God must be with this movement. And therefore, we've got God's endorsement, as it were. And the whole charismatic movement in the United States has really been influential in bringing a lot of denominations together.
Okay.
So, for instance, it's spread far more broadly than just the Pentecostal movement, for instance, so that you even have Pope Francis, who is the current Roman Catholic Pope. He is a charismatic. Okay. He claims to speak in tongues and so forth. So, and he actually met with a gathering of other evangelical charismatics as well. So that's interesting to note. So let's have a look at verse
15. Is that right?
I think it was 15, yeah.
Yep. The second beast was granted power to give breath to the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause as many as would not worship the image of the beast to be killed.
All right, I want to pause you right there. So when it says it creates an image to the first beast, in other words, we talked about this program being called mirror image.
Sure, yeah.
How does it make to the beast? It makes an image to the beast in that the first beast used state power to enforce religious practice.
Okay.
So what this passage is teaching us is that the United States will use state power to enforce religious practice. Now, it's going to have to abandon the Constitution in order to do that, but I think that we can see that that is at least possible.
Sure.
And so here it's saying that should both speak and cause as many as would not worship the image of the beast to be killed. And this kind of reminds us of Daniel chapter 3, because in Daniel chapter 3, we have the story of Daniel's three friends, I should say, who are told to bow down to the golden image of Babylon or be thrown in the fiery furnace. They refuse to do so. God delivers them from the fiery furnace. And this kind of language is being employed here to say that ultimately, at the end of time, there will be the threat of death. And some people will think, well, how is this possible in, a modern democracy such as the United States? I want to remind people that in Germany, it was a modern, Western, Christian, democratic country, and it persecuted people based on their beliefs, and even, should I say, based on their belief in keeping the Sabbath. And here you have a group of people that were persecuted to death simply because a power arose in a Western Christian democratic country that, it's almost unbelievable that it happened, but it did. And we need to learn the lessons of history as we come towards the end of this world power. So I do believe that America will form an image to the beast when it imposes a state power to enforce a religious observance.
Interesting stuff. Mate, I wish we had a bit more time on this episode to keep going through this.
Let's tune in next week.
Tune in again next week for another episode of The Light in the Dark, where we're going to continue going through all this fantastic stuff. If you have missed today's free offer, which is a copy of the fantastic book called The Great Controversy, you can claim that by texting today's code word ALD51 to our show number 0488 80831. You're definitely not going to want to miss out on next week's episode. So we'll see you again, same time next week.